You know that feeling? A relationship that's a total roller coaster, just full of these incredible highs and, well, crushing lows. And for some reason, you just can't seem to get off the ride. It's way more common than you think. And today, we're going to get into the science of why that kind of emotional chaos can feel so addictive, so much like love.
Okay, so let's dive in with a metaphor that really helps make sense of this. Think about emotional drama like it's the junk food of relationships. Just like a burger and fries, it can feel so good in the moment. That intensity, that rush, it's satisfying. But in the long run, it just chips away at your emotional stability, leaving you feeling totally drained and pretty unhealthy. And that kind of leads us to the million-dollar question, right? If we know this pattern is destructive, why on earth do our brains seem to actively go looking for it? Why does some part of us actually crave the very thing that messes with our peace? To answer that, we really have to look under the hood at our own brain chemistry. It turns out there's what you might call a passion pretender at work here. It's a biological process that is a master at mimicking the feeling of a deep, genuine connection. And this pretender's favorite tool is a chemical you've definitely heard of, dopamine. This is your brain's reward chemical. It gets released whenever you do something that feels good, eating your favorite food, getting a compliment, hitting a goal, and its whole job is to say, hey, that was great, let's do that again. Now, here's the real problem. For all its amazing complexity, our brain's reward system is, well, it's kind of primitive. It's not very good at telling the difference between what's truly good for us in the long run and what just feels good for a minute. Plus, it's a system that can be easily conditioned by our past, which makes some of us way more prone to these patterns than others. And this is exactly where the wires get crossed. Think about it. You have a massive fight with someone, and then you make up. That whole reconciliation period, the relief, the apologies, that feeling of being intensely close again, that triggers a huge, and I mean huge, surge of dopamine. It's an incredibly powerful, rewarding high. So your brain logs that feeling, that intense dopamine spike, as something amazing, something you should want more of. But it gets confused. It mistakes that huge spike with the gentler, more sustained dopamine that comes from a secure, stable bond. One is a flash flood, the other is a steady stream. But your brain doesn't really care. It just feels the rush and says, more of that, please. And this really gets right to the heart of the illusion. Our brains basically interpret the neurological storm of all that volatility as a signal for passion. It mistakes the relief from pain for the presence of love. So how does this one little confusion actually trap us? Well, it creates this predictable, super addictive pattern. Let's call it the chaos reward cycle. This is the very mechanism that gets us hooked on that roller coaster. Let's walk through this, because once you see the steps, you can't unsee them. First step, tension and instability. Things just feel off, There's this growing unease. Second, that tension blows up into a dramatic conflict, an argument, a huge fight. Then you get to the reconciliation. You make up, and bam, that massive dopamine hit of relief and closeness floods your system. And finally, things calm down. But in that quiet, your brain, which is now used to these insane highs, starts to crave another fix, and it subconsciously starts looking for ways to create instability just to kickstart the whole cycle all over again. So the key thing here is this isn't just a string of bad luck or being in a passionate relationship. It's a neurological loop. It's literally an addiction to an emotional pattern, and it's being reinforced by our own brain chemistry. Just understanding that this cycle exists is the first huge step toward breaking it. So how do we move away from the emotional junk food and start looking for what you might call emotional nutrition? The most critical part of changing this isn't about willpower alone. It's about awareness. It's about being able to pause right in the middle of that intense, we just made up high, and just ask yourself, what am I actually feeling right now? And here is the single most important takeaway from all of this. That feeling, that desperate intensity, the rush of making up after a crisis, that isn't necessarily love. It's the feeling of a chemical cycle. It's the feeling of a loop. So the real work is learning to tell the difference, learning what the quiet, steady warmth of a secure connection feels like, and recognizing that it's totally different from the frantic, desperate relief of the dopamine loop. It's all about retraining your brain to value stability over volatility. And so, I want to leave you with a question. We've talked about how drama is the emotional junk food. It's rewarding for a second, but ultimately it's depleting. So the question to ask yourself is, What does real emotional nutrition look like for you? What truly sustains you?